for some reason, I'm a few hours in, and as soon as I thought I was about to give birth, something just stalls. At this point, I'm like, I am throwing up, I'm getting a contraction, I have a liquid IV in my arm, my body was shutting down. And she was like, hey, I don't normally recommend this. There are pros and cons to it, but we can break your water. Just to see like how far my son has come, because I was so worried about him in the beginning. No matter how God chose to bring your children into this world, we are all so strong. I am so excited to finally bring you guys my birth story. I am officially 9 months postpartum, and time has just flown by, honestly. But I think that it's finally time to tell my story. I think that it's given me a lot of time to reflect and really come to terms with my birth and the process and just everything in between. So I'm really excited. Thank you for joining me today. Make sure you go ahead and like this video, subscribe. I would like to be doing more videos in the future, so I would like for you to go ahead and hit that button right now. So I want to start at the beginning of obviously my son, and in 2022 he was prophesied to both Daniel and myself. So what a lot of people don't know in that conference is I was having a lot of issues that I never dealt with before. I was dealing with a lot of menstrual issues and things that just came literally out of nowhere. So when he had prophesied that to me, it was actually crazy as how he went to prophesy my son, but also healing in my body, because after that day, I never experienced that again in my cycle, which praise the Lord, because that was absolutely terrible. But so I think that that moment was like a full circle moment in the timeline of Baby Cade. So in 2022, we were prophesied a son. We were prophesied that I would be a mother to nations. And lo and behold, in 2023, on October 4th, I found out on our anniversary that I was in fact pregnant. And I was so happy, because the first time that I found out I was pregnant, it was like a completely different feeling. It was a completely different just moment in my life where it was like, oh, I messed up. And it was more of a depressed feeling, a sorrowful feeling. And then this time it was like my redemption. And it was like something that completely shifted from that first time to my pregnancy with him. So if you know anything about my testimony, my life, you know that I did have an abortion when I was 19. So a lot of the time, a lot of the ways that the enemy would try to lie to me in the past is that I would not be able to get pregnant again. So I was very happy to find out I was pregnant with him. So when I found out that I was pregnant with him, I was very hopeful. I did a lot of research. I knew that I wanted to have my son natural and in my home. And Daniel thought I was absolutely crazy because he's had 3 other children, and they were all born in the hospital, and they were all born with medicine and all these things. So he's like, are you sure your first child? And I was like, yes, I've done the research. I know what I wanted to do. And truly, I believe that we are not attached to the curse. We are not attached to a painful birth. And I believe we're broken free from that as Christians, and that's part of our inheritance. So that's what I wanted to do. I had a very hard pregnancy. I was sick literally the entire time. I lost a lot of weight. It was really hard for me to keep anything down. Had very hard reflux, indigestion, heartburn. So I was literally throwing up the entire pregnancy. But I was very hopeful for my birth. So when it comes around the time to give birth to my son, I knew I was going to go late because my midwife told me, like, basically first-time moms, they always go a little late and it's nothing too concerning. So when I got to the 40th week, I was like, okay, you know, this is fine. Really, there's no such thing as late because really you're just going by an estimated due date anyways. So when I got to 41 days and I don't know, 41 weeks and 3 days, that's when the midwife started to have the conversation with me like, hey, if nothing happens soon, we're going to have to send you to the hospital to get a sonogram. We're going to have to send you to just check everything out, make sure it's okay. So thankfully, I was able to get the ultrasound there that day. And I was 41 weeks and 5 days when I went to my last midwife appointment. And I got my ultrasound there. And the ultrasound lady literally said to me, she was like, you just have a lot of fluid. But that's like a good thing. It means like I was hydrated, I was eating well, but also that was probably why it was harder for him to penetrate and fully engage. That's the better word, to fully engage into the pelvic floor. So, that was kind of hindering him from coming. So basically my midwife explained to me that if I did not, go into labor by the 42nd week, that I then would have to go to the hospital. And, when you go to the hospital, they're going to opt for Pitocin and induction. And that's something that I really didn't want because it could, not all the time, but it can lead to other interventions and other things that I just did not want at all. So I went home and I prayed and I was like, God, I've made it this far. You know what I've prayed for. I am believing for a certain birth and a certain thing here at my house, and I just don't want to end up at the hospital. So I had my doula start praying for me. I just let people know to start praying for me, and I got my flags out and I started to worship. And I just really felt something break in the atmosphere. And not only did something break in the atmosphere, but literally the next morning at 6 a.m., I started to go into labor. I started to have my contractions, and they were very close together. So I let my doula know. I let my birth photographer know, my midwife. And from 6 a.m., I would say up until 5, I was having really close contractions. So everyone got to my house and the contractions were pretty close. And as soon as my doula got there, she was like, within an hour or two, she was like, we need to call the midwife. She needs to get here. So we call her. She comes. They were filling up the birth pool. I'm basically getting ready to get into the birth pool. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is about to happen soon, and I'm breathing through my contractions. They are intensifying, but, everything that I was doing, like spiritually and mentally and everything, the preparation I did, I feel like it really helped me up into that point. And for some reason, I'm a few hours in and something just stalls. As soon as I thought I was about to give birth, and then a couple hours later, we just found out like I'm just completely stalled and nothing's happening, nothing's going anywhere. And looking back, I can see some things that I would do different. When you a first-time mom, you've never given birth, and you're doing it at home, it's very exciting to a lot of people. So I'm going to make a whole separate video about what I would have done differently and what I will do for my next child. But stay tuned for that, because that's something that I feel like every mom, first-time mom, or just any mom at all needs to hear, especially if you're considering a home birth. So I never wanted to get checked to see how dilated I was, because I didn't want to get into my head that if I was a certain amount of centimeters that I'm like, oh, I'm so far behind, or I'm this amount, I'm about to be there, because or maybe you don't know, but the centimeters don't really tell you how far along you are, because you can go from like a 3 to 10 and like that. So I really didn't want to do that, but as stalled as it was, I was like, okay, let's just go ahead and check. And I was only 3 centimeters dilated. I don't remember how far along we already were at this point, but it was like 12 plus hours, and I was getting very tired. And looking back, I don't truly remember as much pain as I don't really remember it being as painful. I just remember how tired my body was, how exhausted my body was. I don't know why I thought my labor would be any different than my pregnancy, but I was literally throwing up a majority of the labor as well. I couldn't eat or drink literally anything. If I'd take a sip of water, I was throwing up. I couldn't even take a bite of a cracker. I was throwing up. It was I don't even know what it was. I don't know if it was just my body in shock, but it was just horrible. So eventually, I had to get the liquid IV, and they told me like try to get some rest, it's not going anywhere right now. Like we still have a lot of time. At this point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to try to sleep like this. I am throwing up. I'm getting a contraction. I have a liquid IV in my arm. Like I was like, I am not getting any sleep whatsoever. So at this point, my doula and I are trying everything. I literally labored everywhere for long amounts of time in the birthing pool, in my actual bathtub, the shower, the toilet, standing, just anywhere that I could, try to get something moving, and nothing was moving. And at this point is where I was like, I'm just willing to not compromise my beliefs, but like I want to do something to get this baby out because he needs to come and it needs to come out now. So over time, we're past 24 hours at this point, and I was really just in my head, like, I felt like God had not left me, but I was like, just in disbelief that like I prayed and believed for something so long and that I was getting like the opposite of what I prayed for. I truly believe as believers that we are capable of having a pain-free birth, and we're capable of having a birth the way that God has designed us. But looking back, I know that I had the birth I had to show all the excuse me, all of the strength that I had inside of me. And I truly believe that a woman never partakes anything greater to the suffering of Christ than when you experience birth the natural way that God has designed. And I'm not knocking any other way of birth. I'm not knocking cesarean. I'm not knocking an epidural birth or any way that you chose, or maybe you didn't choose to have your birth. But I think there's a amazing encounter and experience with the Lord that you never experience until you go through that. And you can experience in any way, so don't think I'm saying that, but I encountered a whole new part of myself and had to tap into a whole new part of myself that I didn't even know existed. And it was such an empowering feeling, not in the moment, but looking back now. So I truly believe that there is a difference in going through birth and giving birth, right? So many times we're like, yeah, I just want to get that epidural. I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And that's great. And I'm not knocking that. Like I totally said during my birth, I understand why women get epidurals. Like definitely understand. I get it. But when you give birth, instead of just going through it, it's a completely different, you really understand the natural design of a woman's body and what it's capable of doing. And so that's kind of the revelation that he gave to me of why I specifically went through what I did during my labor and delivery. So all of that to say that nothing was breaking through. So my midwife was giving me so many options. She was like, hey, the number one transfer of home births to the hospital is maternal exhaustion, basically where your body just gets so tired, you can't push. And I was definitely leading to that path. I was definitely getting there. My body was shutting down. And she was like, hey, I don't normally recommend this. There are pros and cons to it, but we can break your water. And I fought it, even as tired as I was, even as like exhausted as I was. Everything in me was like, I knew what I wanted to stand on and I stood on it. Even with the, like, I feel like I'm blacked out at that moment, really. But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do it. So I look over at my husband. I'm like, what do you think we should do? And at this point, we decided that that's what was best for us in this situation to get something moving forward. because I remembered what the lady at the ultrasound said, is that I had so much fluid, it was hard for his head to fully engage so that he can come through, because at this point my water was still not broken. So that was one of the main issues. So eventually she did have to go in and break my water. And I don't even remember the timeline, but there was still quite a few hours later that I did have to labor, and it was intense. I won't lie. It was very intense. It was very, I would say intense is the best word. I wouldn't say as much painful. It was just very, I can't think of the word that I want to say, but I would say the suffering of Christ. I feel like I experienced a lot of it, and not to the full capacity. No one get on here and say that I'm saying that I experienced the complete suffering of Christ, but I understand. I understand to some capacity of like what a body has to be put through to bring life. And who knows that when Jesus went to the cross, his body had to be put through ultimate thing to bring life to all of us, right? To bring hope, to bring new birth to all of us in our lives. So I eventually, I got to the point where I needed to push, and I pushed. I didn't know this until after, for 4 hours. So when women come and tell me I pushed in 3 minutes, I pushed in 10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, I pushed for 4. And I don't get jealous at other women who have like really fast pushing stories, because I'm like, I literally pushed for 4 hours. And that's actually incredible, because my body at that point, it's already been so many X amount of hours. I'm exhausted. I haven't eaten. I haven't drinking. I'm like completely shot. So the fact that I was able to push for 4 hours was actually incredible. And eventually baby Cade entered into the world. My husband was able to catch him, which was something that we both talked about. And it was just a beautiful moment. My mother got to be in the room. Both of my stepdaughters got to be in the room. And I just remember the first thing that I said, I was like, he's here, and I did it. And I was just so proud that he was just here. He was finally in my arms. I got to see him, and it was just a beautiful experience. The little man turned out to be 9 pounds and 1 ounce. So that was probably a huge reason of why it was pretty hard for me to fully get him into this world. But I know for a long time I mourned my birth experience, and I felt like I did something wrong as a Christian. I felt like I didn't believe enough. I didn't have enough faith. But I did get my home birth experience, and I did do it all natural, and I did it in 35 hours. 35 hours is a long time, but looking back now, and I think that's why I chose to do this so many months later, is because I'm so proud of myself. And just to see like how far my son has come, because I was so worried about him in the beginning. And that's a whole nother testimony, and just something that I'm so proud of is how far we've come together. And I'm just really thankful, truly, that God was able to give me my home birth, and he was able to just show me a perspective of his character and show me how strong that women truly are, no matter how you chose to birth, or no matter what your birth story ended up to be. Just no matter how God chose to bring your children into this world, we are all so strong. And that's something that my midwives really helped me with, and helped me understand that every birth is so special, and every birth is so unique and special to God. So that's just my story. There is a bunch of many stories and testimonies in that, but that's what I want to leave you all with today, because I know some of you watched my birth video, and although it might have looked really amazing and like the highlights, there was definitely a lot going on in that long amount of time. But I do not regret it. I will definitely be doing home birth again. And I encourage any woman to look into home birth and look into the natural design of what God has created for us as women, because it's a beautiful experience, not only with our Heavenly Father, not only with our spouses in that moment, but just your precious baby. So that's my story, and I will definitely be on here more, but I'm truly just so thankful, and I hope you enjoyed my birth story.